Hi, hey, hello, and welcome to episode 16 of Trail Society, brought to you by our friends over at Strava, the #1 app for runners and cyclists. I'm Corinne Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen.
You guys, this is, I think, our last Strava segment episode, which is kind of sad. I'm kind of sad that we've made it through our interviews. We're sharing one last interview today. It's really, really special. I legitimately just finished listening to it right before we hit record today. But before we do that, we're going to catch up on lots of ultra news. But I also wanted to, while we're talking about Strava segment stories, pick your brains a little bit, as we are all subscribers to Strava. What have your favorite subscription-based features been while using it, right? Like Keely, I know that you just used one of the features recently and had a pretty good experience with it. What was that?
Totally. Yeah. I used the route builder recently because I was in Tucson and had no clue what kind of routes would be good. So I followed some of the ladies that I know there, and they had some pretty cool routes that had a lot of segments on them. So I downloaded those to my account and then mapped that route and then got to follow it all day. So we had the route perfectly mapped out, and we're sure to look at our times on the segment board afterwards to see if we were sandbagging it or not. And it was really lovely. And we only got turned around a couple times and we were able to find our way right back on track. So it was very handy.
Yeah, I really, really love the route builder. Although, Hilly, you kind of were making a joke before we started. What was a feature that you were recently confronted with?
Oh man, these features, if you can use, and we were joking about the real reason we use Strava so we can figure out how we measure up to other people. But I have a little, trophy, local legend status. I've been doing a lot of the same routes lately due to snow and me wanting to be nice to my ankles. But yeah. Local legend. I get people just know that I'm maybe just devoid of creativity and I just run the same things every day. But no, but also shout out to Larissa and Brett Rivers, because I know that they battle it out there. Larissa's over there at Strava. She battles it out with her husband on local legend status at the local park that they run at. So, it's whatever keeps you motivated. But it's these things that are kind of unlocked in this subscription feature that, I actually love it. So
yeah, it's great. And just like any of us, it is $5 a month to become a Strava subscriber. And we recommend that you pop over to the website there and check it out if you have not yet done so. Before we dive into our final interview feature, which Keely will get to tee up in a little bit, we want to talk about some news. And y'all, I did my first race this weekend since February of 2020.
Hell yeah. And it was way too cool. It was so cool
it was so cool.
Pun. It was, but I love regardless of the race, it's a fast and furious race. I've done that race before and it just intimidates the heck out of me because the start list was insane. So, I have to shout out to Corinne, because the first race back after that is after so long not racing is so scary. And then in a field like that, it's also can be terrifying. And to place top 10 at way too cool is pretty spectacular anyways. And you pulled into 7th place or 7th and 8th. I don't know which one you were.
We're going to consider it a draw. I think technically they gave me 7th and they gave Lindsay 8th, but we ran legitimately every step of the race together, which was unexpected and really, really fun. So yeah, I did my first race, and the goal, talking to our coach, was just to get a race done, to, rip the Band-Aid off, to run 50K, which was definitely asking a lot of my body and asking me to trust my body again, which, injuries, as we've talked about, really can destroy the trust you have in your body. So it was really cool to let it do its thing for 50K. And then surprisingly had this great group of women that I got to run almost the entire race with. It was myself and a Flagstaff gal, Heidi, and Lindsay Allison, who's a Bay Area gal, but she lives in Telluride. We ran basically the entire race together. Lindsay and I did run the entire race together, finishing hand in hand, which was pretty fun. And as we picked up other women over the course of the day, we'd be like, you want to join us? Come join us. We're having a lot of fun. Which made, I think that experience blunted all the moments where I could have been like, oh, does that thing hurt? Oh, am I slowing down? It was not a PR on the course by any means. It was not a 50K PR either, but it was, I don't know, I consider it a win, just getting through the race. And then the race itself was so cool to like, I didn't watch it play out, obviously, because I was running my own thing, but the men's and women's fields delivered once again. I want to give, we can shout out Freetrail here. You guys missed MK Sullivan. We'll do the women's results first. I was like, I listened to the preview and I was like, MK, you're missing MK. She is going to destroy. And sure enough, MK Sullivan, who's the University of Nevada Reno coach, she coaches track and field and cross country over there. Her husband is also a really fast runner. I think he finished 8th. She won. She was 3 minutes off the course record, which is held by Megan Roach, I believe. So she ran 3:45 flat. And I think Megan's record is like just below 3:42. So insanely fast. Ashley Brosovin was second in kind of, I think her really like her successful second 50K. She won Speed Goat this past summer. And I think, which was like her first 50K finish. They ran the early miles together and then it split up. And I think MK won by like 9 minutes, like MK destroyed. And then Tabor Scholl in what I believe is her first 50K, loads of potential, former CU standout, former junior standout. I think she's on the junior mountain running team way back in the day. She finished 3rd in her first 50K. So super, super cool women's racing. And then the men's racing was also super cool. I'm just gonna talk about everyone. Fan favorite, our favorite, Tim Tollefson with the good hair, won the race. I think he ran a really smart race, really tactful race, kind of played with, based on his Instagram today, it seems like he kind of toyed with the men's field a little bit, kind of setting the pace early and then letting them kind of destroy each other and then taking home a win in 3:13, I think. So once again, silly fast. Eli Hemming was second. I think Eli is Tabor's husband. He's a professional triathlete, super young. He's like 26. His first 50K, as far as I'm aware, really impressive to be second to Tim Tollefson at Way Too Cool. And then Ryan Becker, who's generally more of a sub ultra guy. He's been 3rd and 4th here before. So 3rd again for him. Lives in Telluride. He's actually, the boyfriend of Lindsay, who I ran with all day. And they've been running on snow and walking a puppy mostly, not doing a ton of training. So I think it was really cool for him to perform with a 3rd there. And then Darren Thomas, we'll give him a shout out. He was 4th, just a minute behind Ryan. Kind of sounds like he bonked pretty hard, but that's a stout men's and women's race for top 3-4 runners there. So it's a classic, right? Way Too Cool and Chuckanut are 2 of the early season 50K classics in the Pacific Northwest. And we had perfect weather. It was like 48 degrees and it rained a little tiny bit and the trails were in mint condition. So could not have asked for a better welcome back to ultra running, complete with frog cupcakes at the finish line, which is why we all run this race anyway. So got a frog cupcake and laid on the ground and called it a good day.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think all the guys were pretty close together too when finishing.
Yeah. They were bunched up a little. The men's race was a little bit closer than the women's race. And I think someone asked me about that after the fact, like why, actually it was my roommate, Eric was like, why are, every time I go to one of these races to watch his girlfriend Olivia run or to cheer me on, he's like, it's like one woman just like destroying everyone else. And I was like, the men get to run a tactful race because they're not lost in the women's field. And the women, I feel like more often than not, particularly in these mass starts where men and women are starting together, it's hard to play a tactful race because you just get a little bit more lost in the men's field because you're not at the very, very front of these competitive races. And so, the men's race was tight for sure.
And we know women pace it a little bit better than men. So I think there's probably less women who start off hot and run their own race instead of starting out with the first place women. Unlike some of the men racing, but
yeah, light it all on fire. But speaking of lighting it all on fire, have you raced Transgrancanaria Hill?
No, but it's a race that I want to. That was like, this weekend was awesome to be able to spectate and follow along. I love the YouTube coverage that they had at Transgrancanaria this year. I'm
a little biased. I don't think they covered the women's race
dude
very well at all. I
don't think they did either because I was looking for like the top 10 and they were following the top 3, but they were following the top 10 men, but they weren't following the top 10 women. So I was like, what the heck, man, guys, what are you doing? So yeah, I was a bit disappointed from that.
We did not get enough Abby Hall coverage is why we're really upset. I would have liked more coverage of Abby Hall. We're a little biased there, but it was really, I mean, great races on both sides. Like there was action, things were getting mixed up. Like it was not, it was not bell to bell. I think in other races, and they had insane weather, like 90 mile an hour wind gusts or something stupid.
Gosh. I mean, I was exchanging some text messages with Caitlin Gerben. She won the race in 2020, right? I forget which one was, 2019, 2020.
It was one of her, like, it was one of her,
I think it's 2020.
Not one of her best. It was one of her like first big international wins, so
yeah. And I know like she had I think it was a course record, but I think since they changed the course, they didn't quite recognize it. It was regardless, it was a fast time that she ran. But I was texting with Caitlin afterwards and she didn't even realize that they had actually called at a certain point, they had called some people off the top of the ridge because of these horrendous, like sideways rain, wind. Obviously Caitlin had to run through it and a lot of people did, but they actually diverted some people off the high points of the course because it was so, tropical island paradise. Watch out, Corinne, for your Madeira race.
I know. I'm like, well, good thing I'm coming out of a ski trip for that one. I'll have all my warm clothing with me. But yeah, it was after a certain time point. If you made it to an aid station after X time, so probably like back, mid back of the pack there. I mean, it's a big race. It's a huge, like you have to realize once again, European race, way too cool as well. Way Too Cool is one of probably the biggest 50Ks in the US as far as like volume of runners goes. It's generally like 500 to 700 runners, which is a huge race by US standards. Transgrancanaria, big race. So they did, after a certain point, they diverted people onto a lower section of the course. And I can't remember what they were going to do to like rectify those times, but it wasn't the competitive part of the field, but they wanted to get those people finished safely. And so they opted to move them onto a lower section of trails to keep them out of that wind, but also it starts at 11 p.m., which I just like kind of love, like just right into the middle of the night right away was I've got to prep for it from Madeira, but like what a crazy way to start a race.
Right. Yeah, what time does Madeira start at?
Midnight.
Yeah, I think it's midnight.
Same thing.
Yeah, I did Lavaredo at 9 p.m. and it's a weird start, right? Because you have to first start in the dark and then run through the entire night. It's just like, it's very trippy. You're just so ecstatic when it starts to be light out.
Yeah, that'll be TDS this year as well. They're going to start at midnight. So I'm just getting my practice in for these dumb, stupid mountain races.
Corinne, do you go and run some of your own runs at those times to get used to it, or do you not really?
I don't. I prioritize sleep. I think sleeping is much more important. So I think for people who are doing those 200+ mile races, getting out and fast packing and staying out overnight, but sleeping some is kind of the way you practice that versus like, I spend the winter running in the dark early in the morning and that kind of stuff. So it's not, I'm familiar with my gear, but yeah, it's not worth losing sleep over it for specific race practice, I think.
Totally. I'm on that camp too. It's like, usually I feel, and heck, I always call myself a grandma. If I lose a night of sleep, I'm very cranky and I have a hard time recovering from that, not even the running itself. So, yeah.
But can we talk about how badass Ragna DeBots is?
Oh my gosh. I love Ragna. So she's like 42, has a kid, is just like, I've had the pleasure of racing Ragna, and I think I'm like maybe 1 out of like 20 of the times I've raced her that I've actually beaten her. She's such a beast. Yeah, she's amazing. And so it's so funny to see. I mean, we mentioned Abby Hall, like strong international performance. She got second. Yeah. And so especially I think for her of a distance, like over 100K, right? This is awesome for Abby, but she started out like guns blazing. I was like listening to her interview afterwards and she was like, I was a bit surprised to be leading through the first 2 aid stations. She's like, but I just kept going and then Ragna kind of passed her in the night. And then I think she kind of established a bit of a gap, but Ragna is like so incredibly strong. And then, like the third place finisher, Claudia, she was second in 2020. Yeah.
Well, yeah, whenever the last time they had the race was, she was she was second. I think in that race too, Ragna dropped out of the previous edition of this race. So it was kind of redemption for Ragna. It was an amazing, like just a great way for Abby to kick off her 2022 season. Like I think super exciting international result for her, like stout field. And then Claudia in third was pretty cool. And then the men's race was a Spanish sweep. They destroyed it. It was really cool. And I'm biased. Pablo Villa is my Adidas Terrex teammate, and he put together a great race after, I think, having a disappointing UTMB experience. We had a lot of guys have to drop out of UTMB. UTMB just bites everyone, but I think to get a win, it's his second win at Transgrancanaria. So that was really, really cool to see Pablo Villa. And then Hill, your teammate, right? No, your old teammate, former teammate. Yeah.
But actually, I think because Pau and Pablo, they finished like hand in hand one year.
That might be the year that I'm thinking of that Pablo won.
Exactly. Yeah, so and then Pau, like, just a shout out to him too. I know him very well. And I mean, I think people know him now more because he won UTMB. But like, he is such a strong runner, and he had a year of injury. He had a knee surgery, like coming back from it. So I think that was a really strong performance from him. And it was really cool to see him do so well. And yeah.
And then third was Pierre. I can't say his name. How do you say his name, Hill?
Pere, he's Catalan, so this is actually Ragna's husband.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so they're they're a power couple. But yeah, so Pere Arel, I think. I don't know. It's Catalan, so it's not really Spanish. I'm sorry, I'm butchering it. But no, he's like,
he's a good runner. He's a good runner, and he's really good in the mountains with poles. Yeah. Like he's like taught, like Ragna for the longest time did not run with poles at all. Mm-hmm. And he has been like an influence on her and like teaching her to move to the mountains in that way. Cause I think she's been historically more of like she's really good on faster ground. And
well, so she's Dutch. So I think it's like, then now she lives in Catalan. So like in Catalonia. So she's like, she's not, yeah. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, now they're both, I think they're both on Merrill team and Lecky together. So yeah, it's cool to see.
Yeah, they've got a cool thing going. I got to meet him at Western States a little bit and hang out with we got to hand her daughter like over the fence to meet her mom at the finish line. Yeah, she's adorable. She had flowers, so and she was like so tired because it was, late at night, and she's just standing there with her flowers at Western States. But we'll see them again. Actually, I don't know. Is Ragna coming back to Western States? Does anyone know?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I think some of the international women I know Ruth Croft's coming back. I don't know that Ragna is coming back. But then I think notable is that Caitlin Gerben held on for an 8th in the women's race after having a really, really hard day out there. And then notable in the men's race, Hayden Hawks dropped after about mile 40. So, I think that when Hayden's on, he's really on. And when he's not on, this is kind of what we see. And I'm excited to see what he can pull together the rest of this year. But kind of a bummer to see him drop in this race.
Yeah. And I think it's the second time he's dropped. So he's has some vengeance for this island.
Yeah. He'll figure this race out eventually. He just ran Coastal. Didn't he just run the Coastal Challenge? That's a lot of racing.
It's a lot of running. That's back to back to back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So akin to the Olympics, the Paralympics are going on right now. And it's kind of cool to get to watch these athletes compete. I got to spend a lot of time with the para biathlon and para ski teams in Lake Placid when I was living out there and know a bunch of these athletes. What's kind of really cool is that Ukraine actually was leading the medal count early in the race. In the event, I think as of last night, they were second in the medal count to China, but just really cool to see these athletes coming together to race. I think during, really hard times for everyone, particularly for those that live and are from Eastern Europe. So cool to see Ukraine over there representing and their athletes doing really, really well in all these events. And then what's really, really cool is there's this U.S. Ukrainian para athlete. She's represented the U.S. in both summer and winter Paralympics. She has represented in rowing, in hand cycling, and she's a sit skier. Oksana Masters. She was adopted when she was really young from Ukraine, and I think she initially was finding it really hard to be at the Paralympics given everything that's going on in her original home, and feels really strong about what's going on there, which is understandable. I think everyone does. And to see her, she won, I think, the opening event at the Olympics for the US in Paralympic biathlon. So that's a pretty profound statement, I think, to be making at the Paralympics, and really cool to get to see her representing both of her countries, because that's a platform that not many of us have. And so very, very cool. And a huge shout out to Oksana and all the rest of the Paralympic athletes that are currently competing in Beijing. We're watching and supporting you from the States and wish everyone the best of luck in the rest of the events. Go Paralympics. Okay, we're moving on to the rest of the news, and a possible rant is how I've labeled it, because, a potential rant's always coming. But Keely and I were texting about some things that have been going on in the news recently. And two of the things that have come out recently are involving women's sports, specifically the U.S. women's national soccer team, and then the women's NBA as well. And so, Keely, I know that you've read up a little bit more on some of this stuff. Can you give us a little bit of a glimpse of what's going on in these sports leagues?
Sure. So we've gotten really great news for the Women's Soccer League. So they filed a lawsuit back in 2019 asking for $56 million in back pay to compensate for their discrepancy in pay from the men's league, as well as an initiative to establish equal pay going forward between the two leagues. And they finally got a result. This basically last week, which is really exciting. And while they didn't win the exact amount they set out for, they came away with a $22 million lump sum payout, which will be distributed to all of the players in the league based off of some guidelines that they put forward. And they also got $2 million set aside in a fund that's kind of established for post-career goals for the women who are playing, which will allow women to apply for some of this money after they graduate from the league, so that they kind of have a little leg up or a jump start to their careers post-soccer, since that transition can be really hard for a lot of people. And then the best part of this is that going forward, they're going to have equal pay to the men in the friendlies and the World Cup going forward. So that is probably one of the biggest wins. Rapinoe's quoted as saying, "This has been a bumpy ride, but it's well worth the dedication they've had going through, because obviously they came out on top." And she obviously will not stop fighting for equality between the women's and the men's league. And so it's a big monumental day for women's sports when this kind of jurisdiction came through, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's representative of what of the value of that league. And I think that the public has also been fighting for it in a big way. So bravo for that lawsuit finally coming to a conclusion and equal pay moving forward, particularly for World Cup play, when the U.S. men's team doesn't qualify, I feel like, half the time for the World Cup. So right. Yes, take it.
Yeah. And then there's a win for the WNBA too. And this one is so exciting to me because I feel like I've had this discussion with so many girlfriends where we're talking about how to advance female sports. And I'm always like, we need to fund them, right? We need to give them money so that the women don't have to have second jobs and pinch pennies to go to the grocery store and work off of a very low salary to try to perform their best. And I always kind of give the WNBA as an example of well, I think the WNBA could use some funding so that they can elevate the women that are in there, actually give them good amounts of salary that allow them to fuel their body well and not have to stress about going to Europe every summer and actually be able to live. And we kind of got there. So the most recent update here is that the WNBA kind of raised some money from investors, and they raised over $75 million. And this will go toward salaries and all of that kind of stuff. And they've also started raising the ceiling of the max salary. So it used to be around $200,000 or less for the max you could make in the league. And now it's up to $500,000. So baby step, because the start pay for the NBA is over $1 million.
The total team pay salary cap has been 1.4 for women's teams, for example, versus no guy is playing for that little on the men's side. And that was the entire team salary cap on the women's side. So this is it seems small, but I think it's a big step forward, and it kind of treats sports. It changed my mind on how sports can operate, right? As this, it's almost I think of raising capital or going through a round of funding, all my friends here in the Bay Area that are in tech, oh, we're doing, we're our Series B or Series C. It's jargon that I don't understand, but I was sports could operate in such a way too, in which they can raise this capital and then use it for pay benefits, but also use it for, further investment in the league. And that to me is this really interesting financial structure that it has to exist, but it hadn't occurred to me that that would be one way to do it through specific kind of almost private institutes coming on as backers, as funders for the league.
Yeah. And by doing this, they're going to have like they're going to be able to reach a higher ceiling of performance, right? Because they're going to be able to focus more time on playing, not having to be stressed about moving across the seas every year. And so it'll be exciting to see how this investment actually furthers the future of the WNBA going forward. So yeah, I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And then, Keely, have you yet been to the sports bra?
I don't know if it's opened yet. So I think it opens in April.
Okay. Such a cool name. I love
it. I'm really excited for it because it's the first ever women's sports bar opening in Portland, my hometown.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. The owner, Jenny, was quoted as saying 40% of athletes are women. 96% of all athletes on TV are men. And like that is their mission, to change that, to say, you know, if yes, like, okay, whatever that 4% is on TV, I don't care what sport it is, we're playing it. Like I want women to be able to come in here and see women's sports and watch women's sports and have a place for that. And I thought that was just, one, startling that hadn't been done yet. And two, how exciting that they like have the backers. They've developed this, they're opening this sports bra, this bar. Like, I think that's, I don't know. I'm hoping that we have more kind of local and community initiatives like that to just show all women and show girls, right, that like there is a place for them.
Totally. Yeah. You guys will have to come visit when it opens. We'll go.
Oh, can we please? I'm so there. I'm so there.
And I just love the pun on the name. It's so great.
I tried to Google it. I really want to know how they're decorating the entire facility, because I think it's just going to be so cool. It's going to be such a fierce exclamation of female power, I'm sure.
Yeah. And it sounded like locally they were reaching out to some to local female builders and that kind of thing to help construct everything. And then I thought another really good quote from the article was, globally, this is talking about what the owner wanted to accomplish globally. And she said, and it was global. She wants to change the perception of women's sports, that women's sports can't make money. She wants to encourage the young women who might quit doing something they love because they don't see a path forward. She wants pay equity, and she wants to change the whole system. And I was like, yes. And to think, I think we get really close-minded that we can't make a difference in our day-to-day and in what we're doing, that we can't make a difference. We can't reach people. And it's like, no, you can reach people in whatever you're doing. And I think it's really cool that she's channeling that into this location and space that can be, that can reach women and kind of set, I don't know, chart a new course for many people, which is very cool. Is that all the optimistic news we have? I think now we're moving on to the potential rant section.
Yeah.
Back to the Paralympics.
Back to the Paralympics. Back to the sporting world and the global world that we all live in. Obviously, you know, it's hard to talk about these happy, fun things about racing, all that kind of stuff, when there is, you know, this horrible event going on in Europe with the invasion. An attack on the Ukrainian people by Russia and by their allies in Belarus. And it's, you know, I feel for what is it, like well over 1 million refugees, primarily women and children, who have fled to Eastern Europe, other countries in Eastern Europe, largely like Poland and Romania, as well as friends of ours, really good friends of ours, Hilly and I, my teammates, who Hilly knows from the skyrunning world really well, Demon at Katerina, right? We've got people stuck in war, trapped in war on both sides, and reading really, really devastating things from everyone involved. They're really cool. Before we kind of go into the sanctions rant, a lot of athletes are stepping up. Eric Lesser, who's this famous German biathlete who has 125,000 followers on Instagram, turned over his Instagram account to a Ukrainian biathlete so that they could share what's going on in Ukraine through his Instagram account to get eyes on it, because they don't have the reach that he has. So that's, I think, was such a cool way to highlight someone else's voice and highlight their experience and what's going on. So there's a lot of things like that going on right now, which I think is really cool to show unity, to show kind of the stick togetherness. This past week, I shared a kind of global athlete report on what was going on with the Paralympics, and pressure kind of coming from the IOC, or the International Olympic Committee, and the IPC, the International Paralympic Committee, about sanctions, athletic sanctions against Russia and Belarus. And while it's hard to, sanctions are difficult. Sanctions require the punishment of people who might not be actively involved in what's happening, right? It's going to punish, quote unquote, innocent people who just happen to be Russian, happen to be from Belarus, et cetera. And while that is really hard to kind of see, what's the emotional side of that and what's the rational side of that, I do think that historically, Putin has used global athletics, in particular things like the Olympics and Paralympics, to both hold power nationally, locally to Russia, but also internationally, right? That's why dictators oftentimes win getting to host the Olympics, is because they want to show the world that they're good. They want to hide the trouble that they're causing. It gives them a lot of power. And a lot of these athletes are actually, in Europe, it's pretty common for Olympic athletes to be paid as soldiers. That's kind of what but as a soldier, they work as an athlete. We do this a little bit with the National Guard in the US in certain sports, particularly Winter Olympic sports that don't make a ton of money. So these athletes are used as propaganda, but there's this blurry line all of a sudden where we have this difference between the sanctions that could potentially put pressure on Putin, i.e. take away national symbolism within the sports of like the Biathlon World Cup and the Nordic Skiing World Cup and the Paralympics currently ongoing, and the Olympics, World Athletics, removing Russian and Belarusian athletes. So there's that side of things where these athletes do represent there's national symbolism behind these athletes. And then there's civilian sports is what I'm calling them, because I don't know what else to call them. And in a lot of ways, although ultramarathon is a professional sport, it's in a lot of ways, it's mostly a civilian sport in which we're all taking place in it. And so to show solidarity, organizations like UTMB are banning Russian and Belarusian athletes. And in my mind, that just seems really performative. These athletes that are currently living in Russia or Belarus can't actually travel from those countries. I don't think banning athletes in that nature, these civilian athletes, puts any pressure back on Putin in any way whatsoever. And so that is really, really hard for me to wrap my brain around. Like I can see and I can support the banning of these athletes being able to be national emblems at things like, the World Championships for track and field. Indoor World Championships are coming up in Serbia, or pulling the support from races that are supposed to be happening in Russia, right? The International Ski Federation pulled all the World Cup finals out of Russia that were supposed to happen in about a month, and have reallocated those to Western Europe. So I do see how some of that can provide pressure, but it's really hard for me to see the rationality of quote unquote standing with Ukraine by in a way performatively banning civilian athletes that does not reflect on anyone in power in Russia. And I don't know, there's no right answer. None of us are political experts here or geopolitical experts, but I'm wondering if there's been, as these initiatives, let's say, have been rolled out, have either one of you had strong feelings one way or the other? Like, I think it's bringing up a lot of strong feelings out of everyone I feel like that I've talked to.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, I'm really glad that, Corinne, you wanted to talk about this. It's obviously really hard. And I think I have a lot of mixed feelings. I don't think anything is black and white, but, and I do completely understand your point about, I like how you put it, civilian versus like kind of bigger, like mainstream, because I do believe that Putin uses that as a way to show power and that, like Russia is number one. But I also do think that there's a harsh reality that we all have to kind of go with, that this is a bystander of war. And that, like, even though, my friends Dima and Ekaterina, like, they might not support the war. And even if they risk their lives literally to oppose said war.
They already have, right? By posting on Instagram, they have risked their lives speaking out.
Exactly. Even if that is happening, and they're against it, there is kind of this harsh reality that we can't avoid, that certain sanctions are going to affect the civilians. And I do think it takes courage on the fact of UTMB and other people to kind of take that stance, to be like, okay, like, and also, they want trail running to be a mainstream. It is more of a mainstream sport in Europe than it is here.
For sure. But I think the difference between mainstream and national symbolism
absolutely
is the fact that like in ultra running, Russian athletes might represent Nike or Adidas or Salomon or whatever, but they don't necessarily, it's not like, we're lifting their flag and singing the national anthem at the podium ceremony, like you're going to see at the FIS World Cups and the IBU World Cups and that kind of thing. And I think to me, that's the difference in a way, as far as like these athletes being symbols or not.
Completely. I mean, I see that point, but again, to my point is there is kind of this harsh reality that innocent bystanders will be affected, and banning people from coming to certain races in Europe and in the trail running world, particularly, right? I mean, that is happening, but also all these other sanctions that are being put on, banks, commerce, trade, like that
travel.
Will affect.
There's no planes leaving Russia right now. So that to me is why it's performative in a way.
And that's all going to affect all of this as well. So I think, it's horrible what's happening in Ukraine. And I think, putting sanctions on Russia to try to force them into, stopping this war, that's necessary, right? That's kind of the action that the United States and Europe is trying to kind of go, as opposed to like putting troops on the ground. But, I think there's a harsh reality that I can't get around. And it's heartbreaking that innocent bystanders are going to be affected.
Yeah, that's war, right? There's the people in Ukraine are it's not like they're not being devastated either, right? It's like their lives are greatly impacted and in upheaval. And so, I mean, a 19-year-old Ukrainian biathlete died protecting in protecting. I don't know if I don't think he was in Kyiv. I think he was in another territory, but it was reported by the IBU that he passed away this past week. And it's kind of wild to see these athletes who just legitimately were at he didn't go to World Juniors because he was there defending instead of being in Utah. And, Ukrainian biathletes who were legit just at the Olympics are now, at home doing the same thing. So it's really difficult. And I don't think there's a right answer besides the fact that no one wants the war, but it's doesn't make it easier. And I think the big thing is that, sanctions are difficult. I don't know. I think it's hard to understand if we support or don't support something, but I do think that it's going to be hard for everyone. And it's interesting to see different organizations and different levels of organizations try to take action either authentically or inauthentically. But the biggest thing is that we're thinking about everyone who has been displaced and affected by war, both people who have actively been fleeing from Ukraine or have stayed there to fight, and also friends and family that live in the States or live elsewhere in the world who are watching, their country, their home be devastated and not be able to do anything about it. So we're thinking about all of you. And I think that is where we will end our rant for today. Maybe we're just going to make the rant a regular thing anyway. But with that all being said, we are going to share with you now our last Strava segment story interview. We want to give a big shout out to our good friends at Freetrail for helping us make this podcast happen, and our really good friends over at Strava for being our support through this short series. I did not actually get to be on this interview. I just listened to it, but Keely, you got to set up this interview with Vicky and is it Eloise? I'm saying that right. And I'm wondering if you could give us a little introduction into their story before we dive into their interview.
We got to talk to Victoria Desa and Eloise Morhain. So if I butchered that, Eloise, I'm really sorry. Anyways, but they are both two female cyclists who live in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And we talked to them about a lot of things, but we really hone in on their dedication to the sport. And we talk through the Fuga Club de Ciclismo that Vicky created in Brazil to kind of embody the true nature of cycling and make it more fun, and also encourage more females to be in sport. And even more importantly than that, they both are super passionate about expanding sport for females in Brazil. So we really go down that rabbit hole as well. And I think you guys will be pretty shocked at a lot of the comparisons between their attitude towards females in sport and ours, and how it's different across countries, because they are just these balls of energy who are just so excited for other badass, strong females to enter the sport. And it's a breath of fresh air. So we're going to take you into that interview now. We'll start off with giving you a little bit of an introduction from each of them, and their kind of background in sport and their background in cycling.
I am Victoria, but everyone calls me Vicky because Victoria is too formal for me. I'm actually a lawyer, but nowadays I'm mostly an entrepreneur. So I have 3 different businesses. I own a burger shop, I own a cycling club, and I also own a securities company, which is a financial market. So, well, I actually got into cycling because of my dad. When I was like 5 years old, he would take us to the park and we would go cycling. So it was something that was natural to me. And as I became a teenager, I continued cycling actually. So I never stopped. But I used to cycle during weekends and only like mountain biking. And then when I started studying like close to home, I just took the bike and then I started commuting. So I've been commuting by bike since 2007. I actually bought a car only this year and I just cannot stand using it during weekdays. I just hate it. So bike is really a big part of my life. And I founded Fuga because I just didn't fit in any like sort of, you have like coaches here. You don't have like really cycling clubs when people just, get together and cycle. So I'm not really into training. And I just like thought the environment was like sort of stressful because it was all about how much your bike costs and how is your watts. And I was like, I don't even have watts, I don't know. I just didn't. So I was like, and I wanted to ride with like different people there was like, just enjoyed riding instead of how much your bike costs. So I just founded Fuga with two friends and my boyfriend at a time that now is my husband. So we even got married. Yeah.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Eloise, but also like to be called Elo. Yeah, it's less formal. And I'm French, born in France, but raised in Brazil since I was 3. And so I consider myself more Brazilian than French, actually. I'm moving back to Europe this year. I'm going to Italy, so start a new life. And I finally quit my job for the past 12 years. That was in the movie business. And now I'm focusing on doing what I like, which is marrying a baker. So we're going to do bread and focusing on maybe some bike stuff, some projects that are showing up. And there's more to come. For now, it's just planned. So I actually started cycling, road cycling recently. It was 3-4 years ago, 2018 to be more precise. But I've always rode bikes. I've lived in different cities. I studied in Paris, and that's where I started riding roller skating. And then I found out that biking had brakes. Bikes had brakes, was easier. I fell less. So I started using the bike to commute and then liked it a lot. Then I lived in the States, I lived in London, and I always had a bike around to commute. And when I came back to Brazil, I was 25 and had a car because it's a city where I couldn't imagine riding a bike. But after, 3-4 years in the traffic, in my car and smoking cigarettes and being drinking and driving all wrong, I've decided that that wasn't the life I wanted to live. And I had a bike in the garage and I decided, yeah, let's try it. Just whatever, I'll see what happens. And it was really scary and hard at the beginning, but I started doing longer and longer distances. It was way much better than waiting for the bus or taking the car. And suddenly I just found out that the city had more cyclists around. And when we stopped at the lights, I would see I wasn't alone. I would see like 3-4 people around, and it gave me hope. So you feel kind of protected. You're not alone in the middle of cars and buses. And then I just went on. Then I did some movies in other cities. I left São Paulo. And when I came back to work only in São Paulo, I started dating a guy who was we were both commuting to work, and he was really fast on his really cute bike. And I said, oh my God, why can I go that fast? I don't understand. So I started talking, I got to work, and he was there like, oh, so you were the one who passed me on this time. And yeah, so I checked the bike, and it was his first day. We started talking, and actually a few months later, we started dating, and he was a really good cyclist, I discovered. So we went cycling around, me with my city bike, and he with his good bike. And he looked at me and said, you have something, let's try my bike. Then I tried his bike, and it was okay. He looked at me and said, yeah, you have to take this seriously because you're good. And he was actually working at Fuga, and so he took me to the group. And I said, no, let's not mix up this stuff. This is your life. No, let's just keep live your life. I'll live mine. It's fine. And then actually it didn't work like that. I started riding with Vicky and everyone, and it was amazing. And then the relationship finished. We broke up, but I was totally embraced by Fuga, who said, no, you cannot leave. You have to stay. So we organized ourselves, and then I just became totally addicted to cycling. And I dropped everything else I was doing. I don't know, I did boxing or dancing, and cycling took the most part of my life. Like I said, I had a cycling boyfriend who was really, really good and really strong. So it was nice to ride with him, but at one point you see the difference of strength, and it's fun, but it's not anymore. At one point, depending on the day, you see that they want to ride fast and you cannot follow. And then one day we had this event of 100K for women only. And he said, oh, you should try it. And I wasn't sure at all I could do it. And I was really, really nervous. So we started doing 40Ks and then 50. And then, I decided to do the 100K. And I remember the day before he told me, yeah, so what you do, you just find a girl who has the same rhythm and you stay on her back and just go, and you'll do it. Fine. And I ate a lot. I was so afraid I'm eating every 20 minutes, something. You're so afraid of, having breakdown. And it was really cool. Actually, at one point we arrived at this place that Vicky really liked, at Roseiras. And I suddenly look around, and there's no one around, only me and Vicky in front of me. I was like, what the hell? Because he told me, you can go behind everyone, but don't go behind Vicky because she's too fast, she's too strong for you. And suddenly I see Vicky, I'm like, no, that's not right. Something's wrong here. Why am I here? And so I decided to keep, the same pace from far away, but I saw her all the time. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm seeing Vicky. It was really, really exciting. And I got at the top. There was no competition. It was just okay. So another girl arrived before Vicky, and then she arrived, and I arrived. I was third. I can't believe I'm third. And suddenly I felt okay, this is really cool. It's really special. It was the first time I was riding so much. And when we came back, we had we paid, a little amount of money. So at the end, we could pay beers for everyone. And we did a little, game, a hand game or rock, paper, scissors. And we decided someone was going to win 1 month of membership of Fuga just on the game. And I won 1 month. So I got this month, and I did it. But I was still at the gym. I was still, going to the gym that I had to pay for a whole year. And if I stopped the gym, I would have to pay a fine or something. And Vicky said, you should continue. I was like, no, I'm paying already for the gym. It's too much. And that said, okay, don't tell anyone, but I'm paying you for 3 months. So you can, you have your gym paid, and it's fine. It's not going to cost you anything. Just stay here. I was like, okay, fine. I won't tell anyone. And then that's how I started. And that's why I say she was a mentor, because she believed in me that I could stay there with them. And what was really amazing, it was actually the fact that I was on this first day when I found out that I was strong, that everyone, embraced me, all the girls, instead of being like, oh my God, this is new strong. Who are you? How can you be so fast? And who do you think you are? It was the opposite. They were like, oh my God, you should totally continue with that. We needed someone like this, to make us push us harder, and something different was happening, and I was totally being welcomed. And that was really, we say the sorority. I felt the sorority. I felt that there's no competition. There's just like taking girls in and helping them. And also from the boys, the boys were like really happy to have like a stronger girl that pushed other girls to come too. And just, it's still happening like this until today, like 4 years after. And now I see new girls getting in and being really strong. And it's so exciting to say, okay, let's go, let's do it. Just if you want to ride stronger, you can, and you have girls to be with you for that. And Vicky was with me the first time I fell. Yeah, she was really important to be on my side, making me laugh when I was like all full of blood, and to like telling me stories like, I don't feel really good. Like, hey, just watch me. You're fine. Let's wait for the ambulance. And it worked.
So sounds like it's a pretty common experience that many of us have maybe followed a boyfriend or a significant other into sport. I know you both got into running, got into the place that you are now, like racing because of either encouragement or chasing or being chased by a boy. How much did that resonate with both of you?
Never. I would never admit to that ever. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, yeah. Like my first boyfriend, I met him on a trail. Haha. And that fell apart, but I got my nickname from it. So at least there was one success. But no, I mean, aside from that, I was definitely encouraged by that. And then by him and like supported, right? Like we would go on runs together. But then specifically for cycling, I mean, I started it through an injury, but I began to go outside more and to cycle more with a group of guys. But I think we'll get into this later in their interview, but it changed when I had female mentors who came into my life, but that didn't come until later. And I felt like I was kind of hitting this wall with cycling in particular, because I'd go on these rides and I don't even know what the hell drafting is, but then these guys were doing it and then I would just get dropped. And I was like, this is not fun. I'm riding by myself now.
Yeah, my first trail race was a complete mistake or accident, I guess, because I was dating a guy who decided to do a trail marathon, and I'd been running by then. I'd done a couple of road marathons and was dabbling in it with a bunch of friends, but no trail running, because trail running wasn't something that a lot of girls I knew did, right? And so he was doing this trail marathon. He promised me there was a trail half marathon. I felt like that was something I could bite off and do. And so we get there, and of course, there's no half marathon option. So like, in about 5 minutes, I had to decide like, well, am I going to run or am I just not going to run? And so I decided to do the full marathon. And so I carried a Dunkin' Donuts coffee cup in my hand the whole race because I didn't have anything to carry water in, and ended up finishing like beating all the boys and realized like, oh, this is pretty fun. But I would have never had the confidence to go to one of those races by myself because I was the only girl there. I think I maybe one of like 2 or 3, but it was not this common thing where I was from, where there were a bunch of women trail runners. So, I mean, I'm grateful that I was introduced to it by my boyfriend at the time, but yeah, very similar to their experience where I would not have been introduced to it as quickly as I was without that boyfriend. So very grateful for that experience. But I wish it was different. I wish I was finding these things because I was meeting other women who introduced me to it.
Which is cool though, because I think we're all experiencing that in our lives, getting to introduce other women to the sport, getting to collect literally in way too cool. We were like collecting women along the course. It was really, really fun and supporting one another. And I thought it jumped out at me immediately. And you had obviously heard the story twice from like meeting with Vicky and Eloise, but talking about how Vicky paid for Eloise initially to be part of the club, right? Like, this is she didn't have to do that. This is this woman who is, quote unquote, like maybe like threatening her prowess. So like, who is this other fastie? And instead of like shunning her or like being like, no, you can't, don't threaten my position. She was like, hey, I'll pay for you to be part of this thing. Like how that blew me away. Like so cool.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's like, what is it that our coach says? Like Corinne, he says, steel sharpens steel.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and that's completely it. I think when I first got into trail running, and maybe, I'm not sure, Keely, if you felt this, like in the community of Boulder, sometimes I felt like it was hyper competitive, not by every woman, but certainly by some women, it was like, oh, you can't, like, I don't want to train with you because you're threatening this. But it's really cool to see the movement now, particularly in trail running, that it's like, okay, I want other strong women to train with, because like, I'll make them better, but they make me better. And I think that that's incredible in cycling in particular, because there's not that many women. And so to not feel threatened, but, to welcome other strong women into it.
Yeah, I think that Eloise's experience with Vicky paying for her to start is just extremely exciting to hear, but I think it's relatively rare, especially from my experience in these more niche sports. It's like you're the competition, right? Because there's not a ton of sponsorship slots. There's not a ton of races that you can get notoriety from. So when you meet someone who's threatening your ability to win these races or do well at these races, at first, your instinct is to not like them, to not encourage them to get better, right? And I think that's what we're trying to foster here is this environment where instead of trying to belittle other women and to not encourage them to be their best self, we need to bring more women into the sport. We need to encourage the girls who are threatening our dominance or our race splits or whatever to enter the race, because if we bring in more women, we're just going to elevate female sport as a whole and we'll all rise together. So
which is what's happening, right?
Yeah,
look at the, every single race we enter is the most competitive race in, this is the most competitive 50 mile. This is the most competitive 100 mile. This is the most blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's happening in part because I think instead of wasting all of our energy cutting each other down or pushing each other out, there are these communities and these groups that are fostering that. Trail Sisters is fostering that. The group that I trained with in Bellingham is and was fostering that. Getting to train with my roommate every day here is fostering that. And I think that is growing. I mean, I showed up in Portland and I got to go for a run with Keely and Rachel Drake. Hello, best day ever. I think it's cool that we can, you can foster those relationships and then show up on a start line and still push each other to be your very best possible. And that's why women's racing is getting, I think, more and more exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just kind of want to throw in a quote here that kind of will lead into the next part of the interview. Vicky said, every time I see a woman pushing her limits, I'm just so inspired because I know just how much effort it takes. So maybe it's just the empathy of having someone that goes through what women go through to get into sport, to realize that it's not easy, and know there's a lot of barriers. And so they don't understand the point of not being welcoming. And I feel like that really speaks to how they've embodied this in their future endeavors with the sport and with their club and other women entering it. And so let's cut to the interview to really just see how day in the life is in this club in Brazil and how they've really interacted with the other females and encouraged others to start the sport.
We have a really good friend that passed away this year, and she was a really amazing cyclist and journalist. And she's a woman that's exactly what you were saying, Hilary, about someone who pushes you, who looks at you and teaches you and wants to do stuff and not be afraid, and she's going to be on your side. And many times I say, oh, okay, I ride with the guys and they teach me stuff. But actually, she taught me so much. And she had cancer for 5 years, and she knew she was she had she wasn't survived, but she didn't tell anyone. And actually, we went to Colombia together. We climbed the Alto de Letras, which is one of the biggest climbs in the world. And she was doing her dreams, and we met through Instagram. We had friends in common, but she just saw my Instagram. It's oh, no, what you do is cool. You like carnival, you like biking, me too. Let's just have a beer. And then we just, fell in love. And we went to Alto de Letras, and we rode for this 80 kilometers. And she taught me so many things, like how to go down, because I'm not a really good downhiller. I'm kind of afraid going down. And then she taught me how to do it, and always next to me. And she's the one that always said, respect your body. If you don't want to, if you don't feel it, don't go. You are totally allowed not to be in the mood. You don't have to be always strong. And she knows that I'm always pushing myself. And she was always saying, do it a little bit less. It's fine. You need to rest also your body. I know you're strong. I know you can do it, but just, respect your body and what you're thinking. And it's not a problem if you don't go out that day or not. And so that's the kind of woman that is just, we want to be like her. We want to follow her example and bring people in and say, okay, you have girls around, and we're going to help you understand whatever you're going through, and we can help you be stronger, go calmer, whatever. Just, you have someone to hold your back and help you, not just say follow me and do whatever I do, and if you can stay behind my wheel, you're cool. No, that's not exactly the idea.
Yeah. Erica, who was the woman Elo was talking about, was the first woman that I actually rode in road cycling with. And we rode together. and she was in the front, and then I was in the back, like thinking I was like really awesome because I was right next to her. And then she said, "Now you push." And I lasted for like 2 minutes. And then she said, "Do you see how hard it is?" And I was like, "Yeah, now I see." And, you know, it was really cool to have Erika with me when I was beginning, because she was like, she was super powerful, you know? So I was really inspired by her as well. Like when I began to cycle, she was the strongest one. So I wanted to be just like her, you know? Oh, she was the stronger one to the end, you know? She was like super inspiring.
And she wouldn't take like anything from guys, you know, she was always, you know, on the group, she was like always fighting, and like she wouldn't accept it for granted. Like, no, I'm going to show my point and you just go all. She's like, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. And she did. It was pretty amazing.
Here in Brazil, we have sort of 80% men and 20% women in cycling, especially in road cycling. And that was always an issue to me because we were always outnumbered. Like, even though we are a cycling club, the girls that ride in the club are like, we are like top 10 faster, top 10%. Seriously. It's like, I don't know why, but every girl that goes into Fuga is like super, super freaking strong. It's amazing to see. It's like, when we get once a year, we do like a little competition that we have 3 kind of tests. So we do an individual time trial, and then we do how do you say it? Like, you have to climb a mountain as fast as you can by yourself. And we also have a team time trial with 3 different persons. And it's like, when you see the girls, it's like, that's where the competition is, because everyone is so strong that it's like, it's really exciting to see. And at the same time, we are always like praising the effort, you know, like you can have both sides, so you can compete. And when I was riding with Elo once, we were going super strong in a climb. And then I was like, I gave it all. And it was like the first half of the climb. And I was like, and then Ella just laughed. I'm making an effort. And she's like riding so fast. So I just get amused instead of getting like, I don't know, angry or something like that. And I just think it's so awesome. I think it's awesome for us to push the limits. And I'm like, every time I see a woman pushing their limits, is just so inspiring, you know? And I think it's because I know how much effort it takes. So maybe it's just the empathy of having someone that went through what we women get through to get into the sport. Is not easy. There are a lot of barriers. So I just don't see the point of, you know, not welcoming.
I think that's one thing that inspires other girls, you know, from the club, that seeing us riding, you know, together and they riding with us, and then we can compete, you know, strength, we can compare strength, and we can, you know, just, we do both. We just go sometimes out and, you know, like one, it's like, doing a small competition on a upper hill, or, you know, I don't know, we just get excited about it. But sometimes we just go and have a really like super cool ride, you know, with the girls, really slowly, and just talking and just being out. It's like, basically that's our date, you know, our girls' night out is just, no, it's our morning night to stay out with girls and riding around. It's pretty cool. If you put us in a bar, you know, having drinks, like, yeah, no, let's do this tomorrow morning on the bike, it's better.
So Hillary, like just before, we were just talking about how you definitely had like a shift in your mindset when, particularly in cycling, when you found, female mentorship, and just listening to them talk about Erica, I'm kind of curious to hear from what you've experienced, like how that aligns with their experience.
Yeah. So I think it's incredible. I mean, I have stories both on the running side of things, obviously, but in particular cycling. I remember this woman, I was on a group ride and I was like, climbing and doing really well, because that's like what I excel at. But I was like just talking anecdotally, like I'm someone who doesn't have a filter. And so this woman was literally a complete stranger. I had just met her that morning. And I was like, hey, I've got a question. Like, are you supposed to go numb down there? Like when you're riding a bike? And she's like, oh girl, no, like you got to get a new saddle. And I'm like, oh, and then after that, cycling changed for me. But I mean, that was one thing about female mentorship, because what am I going to do? Like ask a guy about that? Like, no, I mean, they're all like too busy trying to like rip each other's legs off. I'm just trying to hang on. But then, so that was one. But then after that, I remember like learning how to ride technical trail. Like I'm not a mountain biker. I'm a trail runner, but like going a little bit faster, and like even on a gravel bike with bigger tires, like going on loose terrain, it scared me because I didn't want to fall. And, guys would just kind of be just like, they just knew what to do. They just went. And I was like, and so I couldn't really follow their line because I was just too far behind. But what really changed for me is I went with to this trail that I was kind of scared. I had done it before, but I had to walk sections, and I did it with all these women. And there was just one woman who stayed right next to me. She took like an awful line, and she was just encouraging me the whole way. She's like, okay, you see this rock. She's like, keep looking ahead. And then all you have to do is you need to just keep pedaling. And then the more I did it, like I kind of like freaked out. She's like, no, like keep pedaling. And then like, she was willing to teach me and to take the time. And then after that, like I just grew in confidence, and then I would hear her words in my head, and like, it didn't matter if they went ahead. I knew that I could do it because there was someone there teaching me. And I think that's different. I've never really had a guy kind of take that time. And I think it's just different how women teach other women in particular. And yeah,
I'm laughing because I've had this exact same experience. I've got
which really one good, with the saddle?
Well, no, I've got a good saddle, so we're fine. But I had this friend Lizzie, and I remember Lizzie inviting me to go ride. And Lizzie is this badass. She was like a whitewater like kayaker. She like raced downhill bikes. Like this woman is insane. And she invited me to go for a ride with her. And I was like, Lizzie, like I can't ride with you. You're like way too fast. She's like, Corinne, I'm not inviting you to ride with me to show you how much better I am than you. Like, I want to go ride with you. And I was like, oh, okay. And I've used that now whenever I invite someone to go run, and they're like, Corinne, I can't run with you. You're too fast. I'm like, no. Like, I want to run with you. That's the whole point of this. And she did the same thing, teaching me how to ride technical terrain, where Steven was like, I don't know, just ride it. Just ride the drop. And I'm like, every time I ride the drop, Steven, I scorpion. It's like not that great. And Lizzie was like, okay, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to grab this brake. You're going to do this with this brake. You're going to get your butt back as far as, but like she walked me through it. And she was like, no one looks good doing it. It doesn't have to be pretty, but this will work. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I stopped scorpion going off these drops. So I do think that has been like a unique experience as well, with like, once again, like learning to do something with a partner versus learning to do something with like a female mentor. Cause I think oftentimes our male riding partners are also our male significant others. And so getting to learn from like a female, I think is just that like changed the experience for me.
Yeah. And if JT's listening to this episode, he'll be laughing because he had to deal with me for like a year or two, and he's just reckless and so confident going fast. And I'm learning mountain biking for the first time. I just wasn't the same rider, and it took a lot of times with females to be able to finally learn enough about body positioning and how to ride to actually do it. And I've actually had this experience a lot lately where I get a lot of messages that say things around the line of like, I've seen you do it and it made me realize I could do it. Or I saw how strong and fierce you were during the race, and I realized I could be that strong and fierce too. And at first that made me like a little self-conscious and also like, well, what, you think it's easy? But as over time, as you get more confident in yourself and more excited for other women to enter the sport, you realize that by showing others that they can do it, that someone like them can do it, you're just getting more female into the sport, right? And so I think it'll be really cool to hear about the barriers that Vicky and Eloise had to getting into the sport and how they see those barriers changing for females and how they see cycling growing in the future.
Wow. It begins of being a woman. So we get out on the street and we get harassed, because you're wearing lycra. And if you have kids, people think you're like being, neglecting your kids, because it's a woman's job to be a full-time mother. So yeah, that's hard. And it's also hard, to spend money with sports, like how come you're spending like that amount of money in a bike? So when I see girls, I see like, and you always think you're not capable of doing something. I think we are really we grow up to be insecure about ourselves. So we always think we cannot do it until we surprise ourselves that we actually can. And when I see like guys going into fuga, they have no idea how to ride and they are riding anyway. And when I see a girl entering the club, she's like totally insecure. She did like private lessons so she can get into the club, So it's like, it's like a complete different standard that we girls have.
So sometimes I'm on the street and I'm riding and I pass a guy because I have a better bike, because I ride every single day. So I'm a good cyclist. And this guy just comes by and he cannot accept that I'm faster. And he goes fast. So you have to breathe deeply. I'm not gonna, but then I go faster and I give him the back and drop him. And then he just has to accept. And this is really rewarding because this is one of the things we have to do every day, to be looked at like we're not capable of being stronger than a man.
So what really stood out to me was that quote was, we grow up to be insecure about ourselves. So we always think we can't do something until we surprise ourselves that we actually can. And then she goes on to say, when I see guys go into the cycling club, they have no clue how to ride, but they ride anyways. When I see a girl enter, she's so self-conscious, but has already taken private classes to learn how to ride. There's just a big difference. And we've talked about this like in the workplace, showing up to trail races, like hearing this same thing, about the cycling club halfway around the world. I was like, oh, this is a universal experience. This societal, psychosomatic, thing that we deal with that, I don't know, that we almost we block ourselves from being able to do something. We're in our own heads about it. But I think society has a big role in why we feel that way about ourselves.
I mean, I also think it's just one of the differences between men and women. I mean, I think society wise, but I also think boil it down to the science, testosterone versus estrogen. I mean, it's there's
poor decision-making skills, testosterone.
But the difference in hormone levels, that's a huge driver for behavior. And so I think, I mean, I've noticed it. It's just we talked about this at the very beginning of the episode. Why the heck are women so much better at pacing ultras? Sorry, guys, but maybe we are a little bit, but it's because we're not so concerned. We're concerned about being conservative and having a good race, pacing it, as opposed to who's going to be first at the 10-mile mark,
or being able to do the thing, be able to complete the thing. And we've talked about how women oftentimes won't even sign up for races if they're not confident 100% that they're going to be able to finish it, as opposed to men. And so that obviously bleeds through here as well.
Yeah. And I remember when I did Lavaredo back in June 2018, I was on the athlete panel and I was shocked at the differences between the men's and women's panel, because the women's panel was super, super stout. It's filled with women who have finished this length of race before, podiumed at a lot of races, right? Won a lot of big races, very, very, very gifted female runners. And not one of them said they thought they would win the race. Everyone's response about the race coming up was I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited all these other women are here, excited to test myself. But I don't know, nobody was willing to say they were fit enough to win. And the men's side, which was arguably less competitive, was every single male was saying, I'm really excited to run out there real fast and win. And it's just like kind of shows that it doesn't go away with experience either. We're still going out there not as confident in our abilities and not as willing to say that, hey, yeah, you know what? I've done these races before. I've done super well. I feel really fit right now. And I think I could win. And I think it's kind of crazy that the men are doing something a little bit different. And so I think as the sport's growing and women are getting a little more confident, we'll start seeing a change in the narrative around their initial interviews and their thoughts around the races. But it's still pertinent these days, even at the higher levels.
But I think we also need to support that. I think we need to support women having those thoughts and feelings, because I think society shuts them down. They're uncomfortable that Sabrina Stanley wants to kick your butt. They're uncomfortable that Camille Herron wants to set the world record, right? Like they are. Like the world is uncomfortable with that. Women can be uncomfortable with that. Men definitely are uncomfortable with that. Like they don't like it. They say, oh, that's not the ethos of our sport. But when every single male before Western States says, I'm going to win, we don't say, oh, they're so cocky. Like, this is not the ethos of the sport. But if a single lady gets on that pre-race interview and says, I'm going after the course record, we say, oh, like, why do you think you can say that? And so I think, yes, we need men to support that, but we need to support that. All three of us, the women in the sport in general, like we need to support the women who do talk like that right now. Because I think it's really easy for all of us to shut them down or to be uncomfortable with it because we're uncomfortable personally with it, because we do have women in the sport like that right now. But you're right, it's not the norm. And I think it's not the norm because none of us want to come off as bossy or cocky or, full of ourselves. Whereas when a man says that, that's not cocky. They're not full of themselves, even if they're not proven, right? Even if they're not proven at the distance. And so I think like we have power to change that and to support that growing in our sport and not see it as a bad thing. And now I'm really fired up about this. This is my next rant. Mark it down, ladies. Next rant.
Totally.
Support women being cocky.
I mean, it goes back to just different standards, right? Like we hold each other to different standards, and we should start trying to break down those barriers. And I think one of the things they talked about in this was one of the guys was saying, like in Spain, I think it was, they were asking Eloise, like, why are you this fast? Like they're these like older men wondering why this 20-some-year-old, very fit female can keep up with them. And it's obviously a no-brainer to us, but they're confused by a woman being faster because they're not used to seeing women up there. And so one thing that I thought was really interesting was them talking about how we could educate men going forward as a way to really like elevate female sport. And so let's cut back to that now to really hear their opinion around that.
I think it's really hard to always be the weakest one. And when you're among men, that happens because, we are different. So, I think it's really important to have more girls inside the groups. But I think it's also very important for the guys to know we are different and be always, aware of it. Because otherwise it's just like, it's not, I don't know. I really think we need to push hard to be in the same place together and be able to ride together, because I'm not a coaching group. I'm a cycling club and we are a club. If we don't, if we can, just ride together, we are doing something wrong. And I think the fact that we have like staffs or girl staffs is not only me. We also have 2 other amazing staffs that go in leading the pelotons, and I think that really changed boys' minds as to how to ride with girls. And but having girls is how you get guys to understand how girls ride. So if they don't ride with girls, they will never know. And that's how important it is to have girls riding, just to set the example as well.
Someone recently reached out to me. We're talking, it's Women's History Month. Happy Women's History Month, everyone. It's the first time we're mentioning this somehow on a women's podcast. We did it. About how as a male, could he help support women's sports? And this is it, I think. This is how you advance women's sports. It's you can educate men, but also like let women lead. And I think that is like, this is what I'm turning around and I'm going to write this to him. And like, as soon as we're done with this. So that was really, really interesting that they brought that up. They covered a little bit of everything in this podcast interview, you guys. And speaking of educating men, I feel very fortunate. We probably give him a shout out every single time we record, but Hillary and I work with this great coach, longtime friend, Adam St. Pierre. And he, I think, has maybe taught Hilly and I, maybe as much as we've taught him about menstruation. I know, Hilly, you were just joking before we hit record about what Adam writes in your training log. Probably monthly. I'm hoping it's monthly.
Yeah. I mean, should I share that? I don't know, Adam, but I mean, I love Adam because he's taught me so much about, obviously, I wasn't in like running. I was in team sports when I was, in high school and college. And we never talked about how we would literally periodize our training. We just wouldn't talk about it. And so like Adam has taught me so much about, what I should track, why I'm feeling this way. Like, I'm racing with my period. That's normal. It's like, I mean, literally it's my body adapting to kind of the training loads and like where he's placed them. And so he's taught me so much about it. And really helped me to kind of then think about how I coach my female athletes and the science that I read. And so I think he is kind of the poster child for like what it means to be a coach and educate women. He is doing this for his college athletes at Montana and Bozeman at MSU. So, I mean, I know he before he went there, he was coaching high school and junior people for Nordic skiing. And I'm sure he was talking to these women and girls about, what it meant to be a woman and how they needed to train differently than men on their team. And so I don't know if I want to share what he writes on my training log. That's
you
private.
Don't have to share what he writes on your training log. What happens in the training log stays in the training log. But I do think that, I think that Adam shouldn't be the exception here, right? Like, I think that's the big thing. Like, he is a standout coach in the sense that he has taken it upon himself to work with his athletes on this, both at the collegiate level now and previously coaching a bunch of us. And I do think that he should not be the exception. This should be normal, right? Males should be educated on this. I think that, to the point of Eloise and Vicky talking about like not giving women a hard time, right? About menstruation, like not making it this taboo thing or this negative thing. And I think part of that comes from us educating them. And part of that just comes from other male coaches leading by example, right? We need representation of female athletes being badasses so that we can see ourselves doing those things, but also utilizing the men who are educated and who have taken the time to learn about their female colleagues, peers, athletes, teammates, so that they can lead by example for other young men coming up in the sport and maybe for old men coming up in the sport. I think that is, that's important. I think it's really cool that we've got some shining stars in that realm. But I think, that is one way that we can help advance women's sport is have men on board more than anything, like get on board with women being in sport.
Yeah. And get on board with females leading a Peloton. I thought that was super cool that they talked to in the interview too, was that they encourage female led Peloton groups that have men in them that are just letting the females lead and kind of like respecting the power of the female instead of, oh, these females are strong, but they're going to follow a male, right? They're letting the strong females lead the men. And I think that's a really cool way to let men learn a little bit about females and how females ride too. So I think that's really cool. And I don't know how we kind of translate that to trail running, but yeah.
Maybe that means showing up to a group run and having women be the lead, right? Or something of that nature in which, it doesn't like we can route plan. We can set the agenda. I mean, I see that even in like my male ski partners, right? Like oftentimes, I'm the lesser experienced one in the group. So I kind of default to kind of the supporting role versus being the person who's going to be like, hey, I think we want to ski this today. Let me take initiative to be the lead. Let me take the initiative to be the lead in some of the decision making. And so I think that that's, communication going both ways so that men can fall into those supporting roles and learn from their female peers in that regard.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like two things too. It's like, I remember, David Roche and Megan Roche, they live here in Boulder. And I remember David saying, it's like on recovery days, it's like Megan leads like this. It's like important to, just like knowing, like letting women kind of set the pace. Like this is important. And like maybe training partners, if you have a significant other that you run with, like, being able to have the woman lead the run, lead the pace. I think that that's important. And also, I mean, we talked about Jenny Nugent in the beginning of this for the first, the women's sports bra, the first bar in Portland, for women. And like, I think she said that 40% of all athletes are women. So why are we having, especially at the younger age of like coaches and team sports, why are we only training them like according to a male physiology? There needs to be an education for literally half of the other athletes that you're coaching. So, I mean, yeah, I think I'm a huge for any level, but I think it starts young, to educate. If there's going to be a male coach in that position, having them being educated about, where women are in puberty and if they need to talk about that and how they need to adapt training for that if they want to keep women in sport.
Yeah. And as we mentioned in earlier episodes of this too, like how many of us remember our first female coach? Right? What did you ever have a female coach? Like, I think that there's a lot of shaking heads of no in the room right now.
And
I think
for a long time, it took a long time.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to investigate and to prod more into and to find more support for women in those roles, because I think they're going to set up to be leaders of both youth male sports, but youth female sports in particular. And I think that, I think change is happening on that front, but this is just like, tip of the iceberg.
Totally. Yeah. And as we see more female coaches coming into the sport, obviously that just kind of showcases the increasing females' presence in the sport. And so let's go back to the interview one last time and see how this kind of translates to their country, because obviously they have a lot of issues in Brazil that the three of us don't have to deal with. And so it'll be cool to kind of hear about how sport is in their state right now, and then how they see that kind of changing in the future.
São Paulo, it sucks for cycling. So it's a huge city. And I remember when I was little, I had to cross a bridge and I almost got killed. Seriously, I was like, I remember like I was 6 years old and a car stopped for like 20 centimeters before me, So it's not really friendly. And I think it's not really easy to get children riding bikes. But now we have cycle lanes. So since 2017 until nowadays, we have more than 400 kilometers of cycle lanes. And that changed a lot. So my nephew, who is 6 years old, goes to school by bike. And I think that's amazing, because if we didn't have cycle lanes, I don't think he would have, So I think that's changing.
I feel it's growing a lot, and I'm really happy to be here and watching this movement, these women being more, less scared of being out, even though we are living a really difficult moment in our country. But they're still going out, and I think, I don't know, there's some kind of bravery showing up coming from women. I feel from what I see around, how many women I see like riding, like Vicky was saying, even with kids, taking their kids on the bike, with electrical bikes. So in every kind of, not only in sports, but women are kind of sick of not using the road and the streets like we're supposed to. And we have had a lot of accidents lately, like fatal accidents and cyclists being killed on the road, inside the city, outside of the city. And even with that, I'm not seeing anyone staying at home. On the contrary, they're like, okay, let's continue and show off. I really feel there is a difference, and women are being more out there and showing and being more brave. And Vicky was talking about this club, Lulu 5, that is exclusive for women, which I also I like and dislike because of the fact that having only women makes it like, why can't we ride with men? But also it gives women maybe more security if they don't feel good riding with like guys because they can not treat them correctly, or I don't know. But this morning I was riding with a friend, for example, who had an accident, like a city accident, stupid. She just like fell on some dirt on the ground and broke her hand. And it took her a lot of time to come back cycling. She's really afraid. And I took her with me at 5 a.m. really early. We went to a place where we watch at the university here where we can ride only from 5 to 6:30. And it's Friday, so there's not a lot of cyclists, like strong cyclists. And there were so many women riding, and it was really cool. And I told her, see, you can come here on your own on Fridays in the morning. And I couldn't believe how many women were there. And I also realized that they go on Friday when there's less like aggressive men riding really fast, so they can gain confidence. And little by little, you see the levels. As we ride a lot, Vicky and I, you can see who rides like strong or not. And you see like the ones who are in the front that are stronger or less, you see the different kind of groups and how women are getting like more confident and comfortable riding. So that was really cool to watch. And I feel that from there, they're going to start, going on their own or going with the guys. And so, yeah, I think it's a movement that's growing, and it's going to still continue growing.
We actually have a sponsor now. So we usually pick a girl to sponsor for at least 3 months. I think Hello was 3 months, but there was another one we did 6 months. And then now we did like for a year. So we always try to have one, but we still don't manage to have as much free spot as I would like to. I think pandemic was really hard on us because we spent almost 6 months without having a club. And that means we had no income, so it was really, really hard on us. But one thing I wanted to do is maybe paying for, we actually did that, on Biking in Brazil. We partner up with Drop, which is a shop that is where we get together. And we actually paid for a spot in Biking in Brazil to be given to a woman. And it was a Southern girl that wanted. She's called Jessica. And it was really, really cool because she finished it. And besides me, she was the only girl who managed to finish it. So that's the Brazilian version of Inca.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
We did some video calls because she was like, I have no idea how to do it. And now that I did Inca, I'm an expert. So I was like, let's do it. And I tried to help her with the map and how much kilometers was she intending to do there. And we actually help each other, and I was so glad to see her finishing. It was better than myself, seriously, because it was really hard. And she was she almost gave up because she had some bike problems. And when I saw that she managed to get on the PC, I don't know, maybe 2 hours before closing it, it was like winning it,
So I think it's wild that these two women are in a lot of ways single-handedly bringing more women into sport in Brazil. funding their way, starting, back at the start of the interview, right? With the funding for the 3 months of the club. Like, I think that, once again, like, how much impact can you make, right? Like, it doesn't feel like you can make a lot of impact, but this one person, these two people, this one club is having profound impacts on women's sport in Brazil, and particularly in women's cycling in Brazil. And to me, I just like can't get over how cool that is.
Yeah, Vicky single-handedly increased the amount of female finishers in Biking Man Brazil by 2x, right? Because it used to be just her. And then they funded another woman who ended up being the second finisher and the only other female finisher the next year that this bike race that's grueling went on. And so while it might seem small in the grand scheme of things, if they continue to be able to fund these women every year and they slowly start growing the sport and having 2x the amount of finishers every year, like that's pretty profound change just from one cycling club. And so it's really cool to see.
Yeah. I think that might be our take home message from the whole thing, right? Is that like one person, two people, one club, you one person listening to this, our one listener, you can make a profound difference. We can make a profound difference in women's sports. And I think that like, it's really easy to get bogged down in this idea that we might not be able to have an impact. And, clearly that is not the case. And Vicky and Eloise are leading by examples in a big way. And I'm so happy that Strava put us in touch with them. It was so cool getting to hear their stories and see what they're doing and get to continue to hopefully follow their story for years to come. We're going to finish things off with Society Slam, brought to you once again by our friends over at Oura Ring. Keely, I stole your thunder last time. I didn't even cut you off. I just stole the thing that you were going to say without even looking at the doc. So we're going to let you go first today so that I can't mess it up. What is your Society Slam?
Yeah. So actually the Society Slam started off with, because Corinne told me not to message her. So, they did listen. And this one was my favorite. So this is what I chose for this week. So for those of you who are still in my inbox, don't worry. I have an overwhelming amount of messages that I will get to you, because we will talk about you eventually.
No one sent them to me. So this is great.
But this one really hit close to home for me because all three of us come from a little bit of a different running background, non-traditional. And this was an athlete who was wondering how he can kind of get to that next level. So he comes from a not so traditional running background. He got into running later in life, and he wants to know how he or we have gotten through that phase of like making up for lost time where we don't have those years and years of running under our belt, and how we can go from being good to being great without that traditional pathway of running as a kid, running into high school, running into college, and then progressing out of college. And just kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on like that progression and how maybe we've done it differently and what you guys have found has helped you reach new levels without that traditional running background, and what you continue to do going forward.
So I would say patience. Okay. You're in an endurance sport, an ultra endurance sport, more than likely. You can't rush that. And, all of your life has been training for this, even if you come from a non-traditional sports background. You can't cram for the exam. Okay. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to be amazing or that you can't be great, but you can't force it. You can't double down on training in hopes that you're going to just crush it. Right. Like, you have to be patient and you have to be consistent. And I think that that's going to make the biggest like growth over time, because, right. Like, your body can only take on so much. So that's my 2 cents. Patience, kind of just keep doing what you're doing. Keep showing up. Yeah. I also don't know how old this person is, but I will say that like, I wrote an article yesterday about the aging athlete, and turns out the longer distance you go, the older your peak age is too. So this is not a sport that necessarily rewards the young and fast. That I will tell you that both 24-hour world records right now are held by 40 somethings. Is it Harvey Lewis? It's not Lewis Harvey. It's Harvey Lewis. Like, he's well into his 40s and smashing it. Like, this is not a young man's or a young woman's game. This is experience and age and giving your body time. So don't worry. I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah. So our retirement plan, Corinne, Malcolm, to do, what is it? Tour de Jean, like Corinne's already done like a 200-mile outing. I wonder where you're going to land. 500? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, one more thing on that note is that my favorite exercise physiologist, I might be biased, is Nick Tiller, but he said in a recent podcast I listened to talking about ultra endurance sport and what not to do basically in your training is that the worst thing you could do in this sport is run too much weekly volume too fast. And so we need to be more patient, unlike Hilly Goat. And he said that in reference to also people typically go for more volume without focusing on the basics and actually working on those different speeds to actually increase your fitness before just increasing your load. And so it's really the seesaw effect, right? Of like increasing load a little bit and then working more on the basics and really increasing that VO2 max and increasing that lactate threshold and then increasing the load slowly again and then working on those two things again. And you can't do all of it at once. And so if you are getting into this sport later in life, you really just need to have patience and to really focus on those things separately to really start building and not overdo it, because we don't want you to burn out and get injured. We want you to become a Jeff Browning and we want you to become a Camille Herron, and we want you to keep going well into your later years of your life because your body is very much adapted to running these far distances later in life. So hang in there.
Yeah, you got this. For those of you listening, not watching us, Keely was just talking so passionately that her hands were going all over the place and she ran them directly into her microphone. So that was great. There was a lot of passion there. And then to close things off, we had a listener reach out to us about, we were talking about adaptive sports with our Patrick Pressgrove interview, and a listener reached out and said, she's like, I was, screaming into the void, like Vermont 100, when you're talking about like, who's doing this, what race orgs are doing this. And so I did not know this. I am familiar with Vermont 100. I've got friends that have raced it. I've got athletes that have raced it, but Vermont 100 is a major fundraiser for Vermont Adaptive. And I did not know that. And the race has also established both visually impaired and mobility impaired athlete categories. I think this came about in part because Kyle Robidoux, he's a visually impaired athlete. He started Western States in 2019, I think. But he reached out to Amy about running the race, and she immediately let him in. And she's actually, I think, guided him several times at this point, which is really, really cool. And so there are races in the trail and ultra world who have already adapted to adaptive athletes and created categories for them and created entryways for them and are finding ways to support them. And so big kudos to Vermont 100 for being a major player in fundraising and supporting adaptive athletes. I did not know that. And that is so, so very cool. So I think that is all for this week. Hillary wrote a frowny face for her Society Slam. So if you did not write to Hillary last week, the Society Slam, this is your opportunity to flood her direct messages for next time around. I want to thank you all so much for joining us once again for another edition of Trail Society. Happy trails. We'll talk to y'all again soon.